You are in room K, for the ones who are lost. And please welcome Paul Rascagnères and give him a round of applause.
So, hi everyone. It's okay for you? Just to be sure. So, my name is Paul Rascagnères, not Rascagnères, and I'm working for Talos. It's in threat intelligence entity of Cisco. And I'm basically malware analyst and APT hunter for years now. And I'm one of the organizers of BotConf. It's a French conference. And just some advertising, the CFP is open. So if you have topic related to malware, botnet, cybercrime, do not hesitate to submit a paper to this conference. So the agenda, why I'm here. So I'm working on a lot of different kind of malware and especially on different kind of infection vector. So basically malicious Office document, malicious PDF, malicious everything. And I'm seeing a kind of evolution of how bad guys use this kind of document. And basically at the beginning it was simply, the purpose was to drop an executable, execute it, and it was a remote administration tool, and everything worked for the bad guys. And I saw since few months, years, a small modification, and from analyst point of view, it's really frustrating, and I will explain you why on this presentation. To illustrate what I'm saying, I will show you 5 use cases I analyzed during the last 3 months. So it's something really, really recent. It's not 1 year ago case. And after I will explain to you why I think it's not the beginning, and it will become more and more complicated for us to follow this kind of group. After I will have a short slide about mitigation, but it's nothing really amazing. It simply applies the best practice from Microsoft and this kind of stuff. So we will see. So what is for me the main evolution I saw? In fact, APT actors have some problem with sandbox. Everybody knows that. A lot of companies have sandbox system, and sometimes it works. And they have, they need exploit. They need more and more complex administration tool framework, and it's expensive. Even for bad guys, it's expensive to buy or create a vulnerability for 0 day, to find it. It's hard to have a complex framework that is able to work, I don't know, on closed network without internet connection and make relay inside of the networks that have internet connection, extra. So all this stuff have a cost, and basically if they send a malicious document and this malicious document drop hold the executable, execute the 0 day on the document, extra, if analyst finds this document, it's over. The vulnerability is discovered. I expect that the good guy notify the editor and have patch for that, etc. So bad guy add more and more step to avoid pushing the exploit if the machine is not the expected machine. The target is not the expected target. If it's not the expected target, they will never send the final remote administration tool. They will send the first document. This one will make some stuff to be sure it's a good target or not. If it's a good one, no problem. I give you my advanced remote administration tool. If you are not a good one, if you are sandbox, if you are an analyst, if you are, I don't know, spam companies that analyze everything, I will never give you my exploit or my executable. We will see 5 use cases where I got exactly this kind of behavior. The first one, so you can have the hash. Generally, I always provide the hash on my slide to be sure you are able to analyze it if you wish. The file name was NATO Secretary Meeting.doc. So it's a doc of Microsoft Office document. And in this case, was a document that include a Flash object inside of this document. So the purpose of this Flash object was to decode, decrypt, and a second Flash document and load it. So we have a first Flash document that load a second Flash document inside of the Word document. How works the second one? The first one was only used to load the second one, so we can forget it. The second one was interesting because he used Flash function, a native one provided by Adobe, called capability server strings. What is the purpose of this function? Is simply to get information on the current version of Flash, the current environment of Flash, etc. So in this case, for example, interesting information, this one, ActiveX, means the Flash document is executed inside of a Word document. If you extract the Flash document and analyze it outside from Office, you will not have ActiveX in this flag. So typically it can be used by the attackers to be sure the Flash is really executed inside of Office document. Generally, when you are analyst, you extract object and you analyze the object outside of the context. So in this case, it could help attacker to be sure it's really executed inside of Office. Potential second interesting element is the version of Windows. So in this case, it's Windows XP. Typically, if the attackers know by advance that the target is running, I don't know, Windows 10, this kind of information could say, yeah, it's probably not the good target at the end. And I've got a lot of this kind of information in the document. It's fully documented, so you can see A, T, etc., etc., but it's perfectly documented by Adobe, so you can simply read the document. All this information was sent in HTTP to a CC, micropc.org, and with the /NATO in URL. When you compare to the file names that was NATO secretary meeting, you can guess what kind of target is behind this kind of document. So once this first information sent to the command and control, the attackers automatically check the data if it's match what I expected from this target. And if it was the case, the CC send to this Flash document two data. The first one was a third Flash document, and the second data is was a shellcode in this case. What exactly this Flash object do with this information? He first load this new Flash document. So you have a doc, a Flash, that load a Flash, that load a Flash. So it's a little bit complicated when you have to analyze all this stuff. And in argument to this Flash document, you have directly the shellcode. So if the target was interesting, if the target was exactly what expected the attackers, they receive a new Flash, and this Flash exploit a vulnerability and execute the shellcode sent in argument. So typically in this kind of case, we are not able to say if they use a well-known vulnerability or if they use a zero-day, because as our setup does not perfectly match what the bad guys expected, I never received the Flash document, and I never find a way to receive this Flash document to be able to analyze it. The only thing that helped me is the code was more or less clear here, and variable is SWF, SH for shellcode, extra, extra. But I was not able to have the final payload, and I was not able to have the final remote administration tools on my environment. So it's a little bit frustrating for an analyst to not have the final payload. Something interesting to illustrate that this campaign is really, really limited. First, it's from OpenDNS or Umbrella, same thing. So the email was sent the 29th of December. So not a lot of people work the 29 or more or less. And you can see here for first peak, a second one after the day after. And here, it's when researcher discovered the file and generate a lot of activities to the CC. So we can see it's really a small campaign. And here, everybody discovers the document and executed it in sandbox and break everything, more or less. So it was the first case I analyzed where I was struck by the fact that the attackers clearly make effort to check if the target is the good one. I worked on the second one. The file name was National Day Reception, Dina Mesrin Bossio, Ambassador Secretary. I found the LinkedIn profile of this person. I don't know if it's a real one or if it's a fake profile to looks legit. I have no idea. So in this case, it's another office document. And in this case, they don't use Flash object or this kind of thing. They simply use, it's a little bit hard to see, a macro. So, yeah, it's not very important. This one was, in fact, a macro document that used several obfuscation to create a JavaScript document and execute it. Something interesting, if you are used to track bad guy, in this specific case here, the JavaScript document was executed with an argument, a random string. And in fact, this argument is a decryption key used by the JavaScript. It looks not really interesting, but in fact, it's really interesting because if you find the JavaScript on VirusTotal, you are not able to execute it because you don't have the decryption key. So the JavaScript alone, you cannot do anything. You need to have the original document to be able to put the RC4 key and decrypt the content of the JavaScript. So JavaScript use classic base64 to obfuscate, not obfuscate, to encode data, and the RC4 was used to decrypt the final payload inside of the JavaScript. What was the purpose of this final JavaScript is to get information on the system, on the compromised system. So they get the level of patch, the version of Windows, the configuration of the domain, the process that are running on the system, the network configuration, and more or less everything to have a map of the machine. And they are able to have the install application, etc. In this case, all this information was sent to the CC, and if the information was okay for the attackers, we were able to download the final remote administration tool, exactly as on the previous case. And we got a P32 file, and this one was the real malware. So same things. If you don't have exactly the good environment, you will never get the final payload on this campaign. Just for information, the 5 campaigns I will show are from different guy. It's not the same actor that changed its way of work and decided to do that. It's 5 different actors. This one, I assume it's people behind Turla, Eurobro, Snake, whatever you named it. Another case, survey.xls. In this case, it's more or less the same thing. It's a macro that drop a VBS, and in this case, the bad guy use a scheduled task to execute a binary. In this, they don't use create file because some security product detect if you have a Word document that create an executable and execute it, it's bad behavior. In this case, the fact that they use scheduled task can bypass some security product because it's not a real process creation, it's creation of a task. Well, I don't know if it works, but. The second step was to contact the CC, in this case, it was a compromised legitimate website. So typically, the example of domain that sometimes you cannot block because it's a legitimate website and maybe you need to access to this one. In this case, it doesn't seem to be really important, but I don't know. And once they have made connection on this CC, they download a .bat file, a batch, and execute it. And it's more or less the same thing. They get system information, system version, install application, domain configuration, etc., etc. And if the data was okay, you finally receive the final executable on to compromise the machine. If it's not something the attackers like, you will never receive the final payload. Another case, it's a group I track since weeks, and they always have exactly the same modus operandi, so it's really interesting. I don't know if you know Angular word processor. It's basically the Microsoft Office Word made in Korea. In Korea, they don't use Office. They have their own Office version, a local one that supports Korean characters, etc. So this document, right in Korean, and the logo, I lost my mouse. Here, it's the logo of the Ministry of Unification. So the ministry created to unify North Korea and South Korea. I asked to people in South Korea, and they were really surprised because the document really looks legit. And the document, when they read the document the first time, they thought it was a classified document. So visibly, the attackers make really, really good efforts to have something really that looks really legit. At the end of the document, you have two links to have more information about some part of the document. In this case, the document was sent during New Year, and the document explains how the North Korea leader changed the way of explain problem between North Korea and South Korea. So it's really, really local, and only Korean people can clearly understand. It's Korean, but even the context is really linked to the political tension between North Korea and South Korea. So they have two links to have more information about specific topic. Angular word processor is in fact, it really looks like Office. For example, the embedded objects are the same than in Office. It's OLE object. And they didn't implement macro, but they directly implemented JavaScript. So you can write in JavaScript inside of Angular document. In this case, the document dropped two files on disk, HWP, Angular word processor.exe, and open a decoy document to the users. So the users thinks he really have more information about the topic, and behind the executable executed on the machine. The executable was really, really small, and the purpose was to get the computer name, username, execution path, and a value on a specific registry key, this one. It's interesting because if you Google these strings, except an article I wrote about this topic, you will never find any results. So it was not really used or not really documented. And the purpose is to get the version of the BIOS. Why? If you look at the decrypted data, for example, I took the PCAP from VirusTotal, and I decrypt the data sent from VirusTotal to the CC. And at the beginning, if it's an ID, don't care. Tequila Boom Boom is the name of the virtual machine of VirusTotal. So here you've got the name. Here it's the username. Here it's the path of execution. So typically, VirusTotal rename the file you sent to the hash, with the hash, and executed this file with this file name. And the last part is the data located in the registry. So VirtualBox, Virus Total use VirtualBox to execute malware. The sandbox system is based on VirtualBox. So thanks to this information, the bad guys are able to detect more or less if it's interesting or not. Typically, if you have VirtualBox, it doesn't sound really good. If the file name is not the HWP one I mentioned here, it's probably a sandbox system or it's not in the good context. And maybe the bad guys know by advance how host names are named internally of the target, etc. So in this case, if you don't have information, good information, you do not receive the final executable. This group is a really efficient. Basically, once the good target received the payload, they clean everything. So if you work 2 hours after the infection, you cannot have the final executable. Visibly, the campaign targets only few people, and once the people compromised, or if they receive too much garbage information, they clean everything and you cannot get executable. Something really fun in this specific document, it's the website used as CC here is a legitimate governmental website of South Korea. So they compromise the legit website. And if you look on your proxy log, basically it's not something really suspicious. It's legitimate website. Here is more or less the map used by this group for this campaign. I've got a lot of campaigns, but this one, they compromised 4 websites, 3 in Korea, 1 in Netherlands, and here is the document. And I will share the slide to the organizer. It will be easier to read everything. The last case I saw is instead of using bad document and get information from PowerShell, JavaScript, or macro, or whatever, they use a watering hole framework called Scanbox. I push a passbin. I copy all the code in passbin, so if you want to read it, you can simply go on this link. And the purpose of this watering hole framework is to retrieve information on the system. So basically, you are able to collect every installed software on your machine, on the targeted machine, simply by going on the website. So you push this JavaScript on the website, you send an email with a link, the guy clicks on the link, and when he's on the web page, the JavaScript is executed and all this information are collected. So installed software, Flash version, Office version, Acro, BAT reader version, and a lot of different things. I don't know if, yeah, this one, for example, is to get the PDF plugin inside of Internet Explorer to have the exact version of it. If the information collected was correct, the bad guys was able to drop a specific exploit for the good version, like exploit kit generally do, or it was first wave without any executable at the end, but a first wave of information collect to know exactly what version of software is installed on this company, what exact version, do they use Flash, etc., etc. Do they use Java, typically? And on this case, I was not able to go deeper in the investigation. I simply know that bad guys are trying to get a lot of information, but I assume they don't really drop something malicious for the moment. It's simply a first look for this target. And from my point of view, it's maybe not the beginning. And I've got some other case, not linked to targeted attack, but more on crimeware, that could be really, really helpful for people that work on targeted attack. Typically, I work on a publisher document, absolutely not related to something, to targeted campaign. It was a pony at the end, so a stealer. It was massively sent over the world extra. But when I investigate on this document, I discovered that when I open it, I don't have the banner where it's mentioned, click here to enable macro. And I was surprised, and in fact, it's documented by Microsoft. The protected view is not implemented on Publisher. So visibly, they decided to don't implement it. And Publisher is by default on Office 365. So if you have Office 365 installed on your system, in fact, you have Publisher. It's included. It's for free. And basically, if you receive .pub document, it will be open with Publisher, and you don't have the protected view. So it's really weird. Another fun thing is when I presented this presentation to people, they said to me, yes, okay, it's great, but we don't use Windows, we have macOS. So I decided to update my slide with some macOS stuff. Here, it's a macro on shit. No. Well, anyway, it's a macro, and here, it's hard to read for you, but it's a Python script. And the function name is macshell. So in this case, if you enable macro on a macOS, it will execute the macro, of course, and drop a Python script on your machine that works on macOS and execute it. So macOS is not a protection against a macro in Office document. The attacker simply need to support it, but it works without any problem. And I didn't create it, it was in the wild, so I don't create malware. Bad guys does do correctly their job, so it works. Concerning mitigation, because it's not the end of the world, not today at least. And you can enable a lot of protection on your system. It's well, no protection. I will not give you a magic secret today. And simply by disabling macro, simply by since Office 2016, you are able to disable macro and disallow people to enable it. Because on the previous version, you can say, I don't want to execute macro, but the button, the protected view was here, and people was able to say, I want. Even if my company don't, I want. You can now block completely macro from outside. PowerShell, you have the same kind of thing. You can make some protection, but as you mentioned this morning, if you use one-liner PowerShell, it bypass protection. And you have a minus bypass argument. Everything is in the name. And JavaScript or WScript, it's more or less the same thing. You can disable completely JavaScript on your system. It's simply by setting one key in your registry. And from my experience, you don't have any impact, except if your company is a big fan of JavaScript and do everything in JavaScript. But generally, it's without any impact. Yeah, it makes sense for you, but keep your software up to date. AppLocker is really, really, really useful. And basically, all the campaign I mentioned will fail if AppLocker was installed, configured, and configured correctly. Typically, on a lot of cases, I saw people that use AppLocker but don't enable it on DLL. So you cannot execute something from your home, but if it's a DLL, no big deal. Because Microsoft mentions it could impact performance, so people are afraid and decided to, I don't want to have performance impact. But basically, with our machine today, it's not a problem. It's not a real problem. And something interesting too is device guard and VBS stuff. With these two protection, you are able really to control PowerShell, and it's really efficient. For macOS, it's a little bit more complicated because I don't know a way to block Python, for example. And I'm not sure it's without impact. Maybe I'm wrong. So, I got a few slides for conclusion. First, from my point of view, hackers put more and more effort to protect their vulnerability, zero-day, and complex framework. If they use Poison Ivy, they will don't do all this stuff. It's not a big problem. But if it's a own developed administration tool with interesting feature or something not really documented, etc., they will put a lot of effort to protect this thing. So, on my investigation, I got new behavior, and typically the CC are up a short period. So if I investigate today after the infection, generally everything is down. I really need to work in real time of the file submission. So it's really complicated for analysts. Another thing is, without the last stage, we are not able to have a big pictures of the campaign. We are not able to sometimes make attribution and know if it's this group or this other group. It's become more or less impossible if we don't have all the elements. Something not really new, it's 4 years, it's like that. Bad guys use more and more PowerShell, JavaScript, Batch, WScript, etc. It's here, it's installed by default, it works, and it's sometimes more or less obfuscated by design. I don't know if you read a lot of JavaScript, but it looks like obfuscation, even if you don't make obfuscation. And it's hard. For example, if you need to analyze the JavaScript and put some breakpoint and see what happened, etc., it's really pain in the ass on JavaScript. Another thing, and it's due to the fact that bad guys become mature, is they know perfectly the infrastructure of the target. Generally, it's not the first time they try to compromise the company, and generally they already had access, maybe 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and they are able to know what is your network subnet, what is your domain. They saw in the past that your domain was Toto, so normally you don't change your domain name every year, or you have a lot of problems. But they know this kind of information. For example, some company, the username is on, I don't know, 8 characters. If they target someone and saw a username with 10 characters, it doesn't make sense. They saw during years on your infrastructure that you have 8 characters for your username. So it's a good indicator. Same thing for the hostname. Generally, the hostname on company use a specific pattern. So if the attackers compromise the first machine and saw that it's not the usual pattern, maybe it's not the good target, and maybe I don't want to drop my remote administration tool on this machine. And with the time, they obtain some information on the target, and they use this information to avoid leaking vulnerability, leaking remote administration tool, or leak everything, in fact. So it's my final slide. If you have questions, feel free to ask me. And I will be here for the day, so if you don't want to ask in front of everybody, you can pick me in the room, no problem. Yeah.
Case 4, they exploited the web servers. Was there anything the same about this? Was it like all WordPress or all PHP apps? Or
yeah, no, it was, yes and no. It was WordPress and Joomla. So it's 2 specific CMS, and the group behind this specific case always use compromised website. all the time. Each case I saw, they use compromised websites. It's WordPress, it's Joomla, and it's a local Korean CMS that nobody knows except Korean.
They probably had exploits for those and just use those.
No, from what I see, generally, few hours after a publication of a vulnerability in WordPress, I've got a campaign. So they simply have a Twitter account, and when they saw something, they decided to start a campaign. So they are simply looking, they don't use zero-day for compromised website. Visibly, they use no vulnerability, but simply few hours before publication of the vulnerability. And just a hit, they always use .jpeg or .png. So the executable is always named .jpeg or .png. It's always on all the cases I saw from this group.
Okay, thanks. Generally, who is behind this APT? Is it government, companies, random people?
It's complicated. I hope you like my answer. No, I cannot really reply to you. Sometimes it's really advanced and really skilled people, so probably maybe a standalone guy but really clever. Well, it's possible. And sometimes it's really crappy. And sometimes it's fun because I work on case where the malware was really complex and really advanced. And it was really fun because sometimes the operator was really good and work in the same time zone that the target, etc. And sometimes on the same malware, the operator was completely stupid. So I don't know if the malware is sold to different people, and sometimes people are good, sometimes people are really stupid. Or if they have two teams inside and the guys that work the night are stupid, I don't know. But I saw some case where probably homemade malware was used completely differently by people. So I don't know. I think it's more complicated because everything is a link and it's kind of spaghetti, just to be hard to attribute stuff.
You mentioned reconnaissance before infecting the target. Do you think putting dummy virtualization environments into the task list, and so not really running a sandbox, but just having Wireshark.exe and VMware.exe just there without doing anything?
You have some GitHub projects that simulate a virtual machine on your real machine. So typically you have additional tools, fake process that you're running. You have specific registry key that looks like VirtualBox, etc. It looks stupid, but on all the cases I mentioned here, not all the cases of the world, but the 5 cases I mentioned here, the attackers will not infect you. So in this specific case. So thank you, everybody.